I didn't really enjoy the building parts, right? I mean, what you see people traditionally doing as they enter technical fields, people traditionally get drawn to engineering, right?
Absolutely.
We spend a lot of time with recruiters and hiring managers, and what they say is, it's fairly easy to bring in people who can do the technical stuff, but if they can't, you don't need to be this hacker in a hoodie in a basement to get into security. But from the outset, it looks like this difficult beast that you need to tackle to break into security. But like I said, if you're in those roles, right? My name is Ashu. I'm one of the co-founders of TryHackMe. We're an online cybersecurity training company that helps aspiring practitioners break into cyber, helps current practitioners keep up with their skills, and we also work with teams and businesses to help their teams, become better on their day-to-day jobs. And the end goal of what we're doing is let's make sure everyone has access to cyber skills to eventually make the world more digitally secure.
That's so cool. And thank you again so much for taking the time to have, this interview with me. And I want to dive right on into the first question that I think a lot of people are, think about is, for those that are new to the field, cybersecurity can seem like a vast and complex domain. So there's so many different specialties and niches within cybersecurity. How would you describe cybersecurity to someone coming from like a traditional IT background, kind of like me? And what are some of the core areas they should start to familiarize themselves with if they're interested in getting into cybersecurity?
No, that's a great question, right? And I love that you've started so broad, right? Because cybersecurity is so broad. I mean, traditionally, what you'll see is that a lot of people very heavily associate cybersecurity to, either ethical hacking, penetration testing, or red teaming. That's usually what the cooler area of cybersecurity looks like. So it tends to be quite broad, right? But I guess my broad definition of cybersecurity are, a combination of people, processes, and technologies that you can use to basically make either yourself or your organization more secure, and that spans a lot of things, right? So if I think about how do we break down cyber on a broad level, very broadly, I think there's that offensive security component. So how are you, as a person or professionally, proactively going out and detecting weaknesses in your technology stack? And the point of doing this is, if you can find them before the bad guys can do, you can be more proactive about fixing that. And that, again, has a whole branch of subspecialties under it. We then have defensive security, right? So how do you identify, detect, and respond to cybersecurity? You then have, I guess, GRC, so governance, risk, and compliance, which is more the policy side of security. So as and when you implement any technical controls, there needs to be a foundation behind why you're doing it, right? Are you compliant to local regulation, right? Do you have specific things your industry cares about? So there's a whole element on non-technical cybersecurity where you may not be hands-on hacking at the keyboard, but you still need a good foundation through which you need to roll out your technical controls. So GRC, I think, is an important one that people usually tend to forget because, again, cybersecurity is associated with more of the technical stuff, but GRC tends to be, I guess, more security adjacent in that it is not technical. And probably the final one for me is security adjacent technologies, right? So fundamentally, the point of cybersecurity is, how do we make technology more secure so that you're not leaking data, people aren't getting unauthorized access to systems, and you're just reducing the risk of attackers doing bad things on those tech components. So security, like you said, especially for IT people, I think can fit into their day-to-day, right? Because you could be a support person, you could be a sysadmin, and the chances of you doing security on your day-to-day job are probably really high, right? You're probably trying to lock down files. You're probably trying to lock down systems. As a support person, you're probably trying to verify things, right? You're trying to make sure that you're not giving people access to the wrong systems. But even if you stretch, I'd say, IT to things like development, engineering, infrastructure, people who work as engineers still have to care about security, right? Like, how are you making sure that the cloud environments you spin up are created with the appropriate levels of control? As a developer, how do you make sure that you're writing code securely so that attackers can't get into your system? So I love security because it's so broad and there's so much more you can do, right? But there's very clearly this misconception that security is only ethical hacking and red teaming. And what we're trying to dispel at TryHackMe is that you don't need to be this hacker in a hoodie in a basement to get into security, but similar to a lot of different things, right? You just need to learn the skills, you need to practice, and there's so many different branches of security that you can get into.
You mentioned so many good things here within this first couple of minutes, and I want to unpack that a little bit more because you're absolutely right. You're like, the common thing I hear is people want to get into cybersecurity. They're like, oh, I want to be a penetration tester. Or I want to do red team, and they're like, I just want to break into stuff and just break these systems, but they don't realize, a penetration tester, that's only a small fraction of the job. And like the rest of the job, you're actually writing reports, you're talking to, these non-technical people that don't quite understand what you are doing. And that's a big portion of the job. And that's just, I think, one thing I don't think people realize necessarily, but also I really love that it really resonated with me that the fact you're talking about, we all have some role to play in cybersecurity, whether we're in cybersecurity or not. When I first got into the IT field, I knew I wanted to be like a networking engineer. And like so many people are like, oh, you should go into cybersecurity. I'm like, oh, you know what? I didn't actually have a huge interest in cybersecurity. But as I've developed my career, I realized I am very much a cybersecurity professional and it plays into my day-to-day job responsibilities. So, I think that's a great way to start building experience for those who want to transition into a more cybersecurity centric job role.
Yes, yes, totally agree, right? I mean, from the outset, it looks like this difficult beast that you need to tackle to break into security. But like I said, if you're in those roles, right, if you're in an IT role, network engineer role, sysadmin role, the transition is probably going to be slightly easier than you think, because chances are you are doing it day to day. From my experience, you see that a lot of what you describe as core IT, especially in some mid-sized to bigger companies, work with security people every day. So I think a lot of people are a lot further on in their journey than they think they are, which is always great, right?
Absolutely. And, I kind of want to take a few steps back and talk about the incredible platform you helped build, TryHackMe, that's helped countless individuals really kind of break into cybersecurity and realize their potential. Do you mind sharing your kind of personal story with us and what inspired you to get into cybersecurity and led you ultimately to helping create TryHackMe?
Yeah, sure. We're very proud of the work TryHackMe has done today, and I think we really wouldn't be here without our community and without users. I think that played such a big part in our story. But as to how we got there, I think I had always personally enjoyed technical work. I was always tinkering with things. I remember I bought like a book on VB.NET 2006, and I was always interested in technology. But what I found myself drawn to like the traditional hacking in the very early days, right? So I think there were a lot of early sites that would teach you to do this. I think there were like things like Hack the Site or Enigma Forum that would have like
Yeah.
challenges on how you get into it. So I think I had a little bit of exposure to it, but I eventually went and studied computer science, and I found that because I really enjoyed the tech parts, I didn't really enjoy the building parts, right? I mean, what see people traditionally doing as they enter technical fields, people traditionally get drawn to engineering, right? But I found that I really enjoyed breaking things or understanding how things work, right? I could always for me the exciting part was I could always break things, but I could never put them together, right? So security felt very natural for me. And then I was very lucky to meet my co-founder Ben at a internship at a cybersecurity company we did in London. That is now part of Accenture. When Ben and I met, I think this was in around 2017, 2018. Security was becoming more popular, but I think people still didn't know what a career in security looked like, and by extension, there wasn't good training for security, right? And at that time, I think the only training you would have on security were very much the boot to root technologies, right? So here's the thing. why don't you go hack it? Start with an IP address, get a bunch of flags, which is, I think, fine, right? I mean, you have people who prefer that style of learning, but if you're breaking into the industry, if you're trying to learn things, one, we didn't think that was efficient, right? Like, personally, why would you want to be spending like probably 20 hours like banging your head against your desk or your wall trying to find this really niche piece of technology that you wouldn't really identify in your day to day, right? So we're big. So for us, we wanted to make the learning process more efficient. We wanted to make it fun because I'm sure Dakota, as much as people would say, here's your hobby, let me do it for fun. Super easy, very motivating to do, right? Versus saying,
Yeah.
oh, Dakota, you have to study 80 hours for the cert. Like, how are you going to make it
Oh,
happen?
I understand completely. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think what I really love about TryHackMe story is very accidental, right? So one day, while during our internship, Ben was playing with the cloud because that was the new up and coming thing, right? It was what the cool kids are doing. So we were putting stuff on the cloud, and I saw what Ben was doing. I said, hey, this is cool. It looks like you're doing security stuff here. What happens if we throw our notes on here and just make a platform for ourselves? And that was the start of how we actually started to develop TryHackMe. So it took us a couple of months through a point where we had a working version, right? And we said, oh, this was super useful to us. At that time, the functionality was we had a machine, you could deploy a machine. We had our own really jumbly notes on how you'd learn about security. And we just put it out on Reddit or Twitter because, we wondered what would people care about this, because we got us some feedback saying, oh, this looks cool, you're giving people access to security training in a way that wasn't done before. And when we put it out on Reddit and Twitter, which is where majority of the security community lives, we got a ton of feedback, right? And for us, that was like a mind-blowing moment because we built something as a side project and people said, oh, I potentially want to pay for this, I really want to use this. So we probably spent the next like 6 to 12 months really building and iterating. So we built we built out the platform a bit more. Ben and I created a lot of the initial training content. So we'd write, our training content on things like the OWASP top 10, on things like SQL injection. And I think we reached the stage where people loved what we were doing. We saw people actually getting value from it. And for us, that was the most important thing, right? Because people would perceive TryHackMe as a place to go where cybersecurity is simplified. It's broken down and demystified. And as time went on, we saw people getting value out of it. So we saw, very personally, I think these are the best security stories, but very non-traditional people breaking into cyber, right? So people like English teachers, music teachers, even construction workers using TryHackMe to get
That's so
a
cool.
job in cyber. And for us, that was what we wanted to do, right? We started as interns. We struggled. People still think cyber is hard. So our end goal with TryHackMe has always been to make, create a community and create a space where we could say, no matter what background you're from, given a little bit of that prerequisite knowledge, we can show you that learning these skills isn't really hard, right? And we want to help you learn these skills, help you get a job. And when you eventually get a job, we want to make your teams better, right? Because fundamentally, when you do get a job, it's about making your organization more secure. So how do we think about applying, individual skills to then team specific skills within the context of certain orgs? So, I think we're very grateful that our users have been so patient with us. We're very keen on things like user feedback, on spending time with them. So we're very grateful that we have an amazing community that cares about the product and the platform. But, I think we've reached a great stage with 3 million users, more than 600
Wow.
businesses and educational institutes. But for us, this is just the start of the journey, right? I'm sure there's so much more to do with the skills gap, and we're really committed to helping close that skills gap and give our users everything they need to progress, to get started and progress with their career in cyber.
There is definitely a skills gap, and it seems like it is growing on a day-to-day basis. And, having amazing resources like this is so great for the community. I really love I love your origin story. It resonates so much with me because that's kind of why I started like my YouTube channel. It was a fellow YouTuber who inspired me to actually, get my start in the IT field. I was at I wasn't a 9 to 5 job. I was at a really bad job. I was a bulldozer operator, which I made really good money,
Mhm.
but I was miserable. I wasn't being challenged mentally. And it was a YouTuber who convinced me to make the switch into tech. And when I got into the field, I wanted to help other people realize that it is not as scary as it might seem to make the jump from whatever you're doing. If you're flipping burgers at McDonald's or whatever, you still have skills that can apply towards the tech field in general. Those customer service skills are definitely something that is very underrated, I think, in the tech field. So I want to build a platform to help people realize that this is something that they can achieve. And what you're doing with TryHackMe is, I think, more than just teaching skills. You're giving people the confidence that, they can go out and achieve their dream jobs. And I think it's so awesome.
No, likewise, and we need more people like you telling your story, Dakota, because I think people still see cybersecurity as this black box that there's this big thing here. I want to do it. I don't know where to start. Am I the right profile? Can I do it? Is it too late in my life? Are my skills
Yeah.
applicable? So I love your story too, and I think I'm so glad you're telling it because people care about it, right? People need to see tangible evidence that this isn't just something we read on a blog, but this isn't just someone giving advice, but people like you have actually done it. So I think the work you're doing is amazing. I think it's going to make people feel more confident making that switch. And yeah, looking forward to seeing more of what you come out with too.
I appreciate that a lot. And I'm going to say one more nice thing about the platform, then I'll get on to the conversation. One thing I really love is in cybersecurity, with there being a lot of times so much unknown and feels so daunting, it can be really difficult to kind of get a sense of what the job is like. And what TryHackMe gives users is the ability to actually get like tangible hands-on with a lot of the things that they're learning. I'm a big advocate for building like a home lab or actually practicing the skills you learn. I cannot, like some people I know can just open up a book, read it cover from cover and just absorb that knowledge. And to be honest with you, I'm super jealous of that because I am not that type of learner. I am a hands-on learner. I can watch a video, and if I can turn around and do it, I can learn that information. And that's one thing I think is so great about TryHackMe is you're actually using the skills you learn. So that was one more thing I wanted to say that I really love about the platform and tell you.
No, really grateful for it, and I think like especially for a cybersecurity career, that's like one of the most important pieces, right? You want to go into a role and you want to demonstrate that pretty much, or ideally, from day one or day 30, you can do the job, and the only way you can do it is by getting a real replication of what that day to day looks like. And we try really closely to do that, right? Because one is, security is not easy, right? I mean, you need for you to get like a real feel of what's happening on your day to day, you may need some complex infrastructure, you may need some good context around the company, right? You may need to look at different systems, different environments. So we want to take all that pain away from users, and really all a user needs to do is come on to TryHackMe, literally click a couple of buttons. They'll have their environment spun up in less than a couple of minutes, and you can start hacking straight away. So exactly like you said, we want to make sure that whatever people do at TryHackMe, as they go into their first roles or as they transition into roles or even improve in their careers, because they'll have seen things on TryHackMe, they have that confidence, right? They're, oh, this looks super familiar. I've done this before. I can apply this to my day-to-day straight away. So yeah, thanks for raising, because that's a really important part of what we do. And yeah, really grateful that you have also found value out of it.
That's awesome. And this next question I ask is broad, so bear with me. What are some of the IT skills that are most beneficial in the cybersecurity realm? What skills actually kind of translate the best, and what are some new skills that people that are looking to make this switch should start focusing on? And again, I know that's broad because cybersecurity, like we said earlier, is a vast landscape, so it's hard just to say what skills should you start focusing on. But like, what are some of those common fundamental skills that kind of apply in most cybersecurity roles?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with grouping it by technical cybersecurity, right? So if you did want a role in a technical cyber role, whether it is elements of penetration testing, red teaming, or elements of defensive security, like being a security analyst, being an incident responder, and even being more specialist on malware analysis, threat hunting, the foundation to all of that is like you said, Dakota, IT skills, right? And I think the fundamental principle behind it is for you to break things or for you to detect and respond to things, you just need to know how technology works, right? At its
Yeah.
core, I think you could jump into hacking, which is completely fine. The learning curve is steep, but what's going to make life easier is how, just very broadly, how do things work, right? And if we break that down a little bit more, those are probably two to three things, right? So how does the World Wide Web work, right? So a very common way of breaking that down is, if you're able to describe what happens when you enter a website in a browser and click that enter button and that page loads, if you're able to describe that process that happens on the back end, I think that's super important. Network security, or networking is important, right? So what are the
Yeah.
common protocols? What are the common devices on there? How do packets work? So broad groupings of, I'd say, how the web works, how the network works, I think is a really solid foundation, because what you end up seeing is to do the really cool technical stuff, right? So when you eventually are analyzing malware or when you are doing red teaming, you just really need to know how things work at its core, because a lot of what you will be doing is looking at a piece of technology, understanding either how to bypass it, or you'll be trying to understand how did an attacker get through this, and you'll only be able to do that if you have an understanding on how things work. And then once you have those skills, my next recommendation is picking an area and going broad, right? So if you're either interested in red teaming or blue teaming, go a bit broad, right? Because I think at least initially, the biggest mistake you can make is specializing and going a little bit too niche. So
So true.
yeah, so I wouldn't take the perspective of, and I think it makes sense, right? You may look at these things and you may say, hey, I'd love to be a red teamer, or I'd love to be a penetration tester, but you would be doing yourself a disservice by not considering other areas of security. So why don't you start broad and just look into elements? It could be something as simple as, what is the day in the life of a penetration tester? What is the day in the life of a security analyst or incident responder? And then if you have enough of an indication of what you'd like, pick a broad area, right? So start with, if you're doing red teaming, start with web app security, learn how burp works, learn how OWASP top 10 works, learn network security, right? So there are tools like, I think Nmap is probably the easiest place to start, learn about how to attacking protocols. And then on the blue teaming side, right, pretty similar as well, right? Look at things like SIMs, right? Start broad, looking at like fundamentals of SOC. So what are the pyramid of pain? So I'd suggest think of it as a pyramid where the core foundation tends to be IT technical skills, and then depending on the area you pick, there's still breadth on whether it's either blue teaming or red teaming, and then you eventually start to specialize. And then on the non-technical front, with things like, if you did want to do things like GRC, I think communicating either way is super important. So like you were saying, Dakota, if you're working on customer service or if you're working at McDonald's, that's such a great skill, because wherever you go, you need to talk to people, right? People are the
Yep.
fundamentals and foundations of what you need to do. And it's really interesting because cyber, you would think that technical skills are like the most important thing, right? But we spend a lot of time with recruiters and hiring managers, and what they say is, it's fairly easy to bring in people who can do the technical stuff, but if they can't talk or communicate with the people working with them day to day, I think that's a huge deal breaker for them. So, like verbal communication skills are important, written communication skills are important, right? If you're whatever job you go into, whether it's, pen testing and writing a report, whether it's security analysis work and you're triaging an issue and closing a ticket, you should be able to communicate things. So I would highly suggest the written communication part. So and in terms of new skills, I think that people would benefit from. I think there's just so much to learn with cyber, and what people want to see is broadly that you are learning and you care about the industry, right? So
Absolutely.
so one example that probably everyone is talking about, right, is how does AI matter in the world of security, and even just looking things up, right? There are a lot of CISOs who talk about how AI affects in their day to day. There are a lot of YouTubers like yourself, Dakota, who talk about how do we use AI in our day to day job, right? So
Yeah.
that's something that would be interesting to keep a handle on. And broadly, you want to be in a situation where you're just tracking what's happening within the security industry in general, right? Whether that's through your Reddit or Twitter feeds, whether that's through your YouTubers. Broadly, you just want to keep a handle at what's happening in cybersecurity because the industry moves so quickly. Like one day, one of the biggest systems in the world will get hacked and there'll be vulnerabilities. And the next day, there'll be all sorts of cool technical ways that you can do something that you never realized you could. So just keeping a broad handle on the industry is probably something I would also recommend doing.
And that's just great advice. And I think that's really good advice for really anyone in just tech in general. The industry evolves so fast. And like, one thing I did when I first started getting in the field, and I still do this, like on my drive into work, I always got like a podcast on, whether it's, Security Weekly or, just a different podcast where I'm gathering news. I have all my different sources, I'm on Twitter and staying in the community. And I think that does more than just for staying relevant because yes, it does. The industry is changing super fast and it is super important to stay relevant. It also does another good thing for you is you start networking with other people in the industry. When you're on Twitter and stuff like that, you start meeting people. And I think it's super important because the one thing I still hate about the tech field in general, and it's never going to go away, but sometimes it's not what you know, it can be who you know when you're getting into the field. So having that good social presence is super important. And it's also part of developing your soft skills too. It kind of goes hand in hand. And I know when I got into the tech field in general, like it was drilled into me, like soft skills are the most important skills you can have. And now that I'm a hiring manager in my current role, it's come full circle. I don't care if the person actually knows the hard skills and the actual tech skills to do the job. I can teach them that. What I care is that they can communicate well with others. They can communicate with my team, and because I can't teach those soft skills. So I think that's really important. Gone are the days of like the basement IT jobs that, are in a dimly lit room and smell of like old socks. Cybersecurity and just tech in general is a customer service job now, whether we like it or not. And that's why I think it's so important having those skills. Absolutely. Now, I really want to kind of dive into many of the myths and misconceptions about working in cybersecurity. What are some of the most common ones that you've encountered, and how can IT professionals really navigate kind of some of these misconceptions and set realistic expectations for their career change?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the biggest one we tend to hear is you need some sort of an advanced qualification, like a degree, to enter cybersecurity, right? And I think we personally at TryHackMe we hold the view that if you want to do a degree, that's completely fine, right? But at the end of the day, right, people just want to see you demonstrate those cybersecurity skills. And I'd go to so far to say, right? I mean, degrees are good, but they're expensive, right? Some may
Yeah.
not give you what you need to enter your day to day, right? So I would say that it's not very important to have a cybersecurity degree, or even any degree, right? I mean, like for us, TryHackMe, the goal is to advocate a world in which you don't really need what I'd broadly describe as as qualifications to just get you through the door. I think they're important and there is value in doing them, but that should not be the only reason through which you do it, right? You shouldn't say, oh, this
Right.
job has on their job requirement, they have something that says, advanced cybersecurity degree, or we need a bachelor's in XYZ or a master's in XYZ. That shouldn't be the only reason there, right? Because I think what people fundamentally want to see is how are you able to demonstrate that you have the core technical skills you need to get that cyber job? And very similar to what you said, Dakota, people want to see you doing things like creating home labs, right? Have you created a home lab
Absolutely.
before? Write about it. Make a YouTube video about it. Have you done, a TryHackMe lab? Build a portfolio of projects. Talk about how you set up the tools. Talk about your learning process. So there are, I'd say, less expensive and to some degree less time-consuming ways that you can actually demonstrate you have those skills without adhering to the guidelines of having a fully formal qualification.
It just sounded like you repeated one of my videos. I swear I've said that those exact same lines before. Build yourself a home lab, talk about it, write a blog about it, put a LinkedIn post out about it, brag about like you're the top 25 person on TryHackMe. You know what I mean? And talk about those things. Because people want to know that you are actually out there learning and building experience. So that is so awesome that you brought that up, because I think that is super important.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, and probably the other second one is that cybersecurity is hard, and it's what you were saying, right? Like cybersecurity is a broad thing. It's very difficult, but honestly, I think it's not, right? It's very similar to picking up another skill, right? So it could be very similar to transitioning jobs into something, or the most common example I like to compare it to is, when you were in school, or when you had to do a degree of learning something like maths, right? What did you have to do? You learned a new concept, right? That probably wasn't that easy. You practiced it a bunch of times and you felt comfortable with it. And fundamentally, that is what cyber is, right? You're going to have this skill. There's going to be a little bit of a steep learning curve, right? There's no doubt about it. But once you go through the learning curve and once you practice, it is not that difficult. So to all the people there who think that cybersecurity is this really hard thing, and you think that you don't have the background or the personality or the aptitude to get into it, that is definitely not the case. All you need to do is just start with a simple Google, right? Saying, what is that hack you saw on the news, right? Learn a little bit more about it. What is something you're interested in, right? How do I make my passwords more secure? And just build a habit of doing that. And all it needs is starting small, building a habit, and being consistent, right? And if you do that over a period of time, you'll see that cybersecurity is not this big, difficult thing that I think people make it out to be.
No, that is so true. And, that's again, just such great advice we're unpacking here today. Now, looking ahead, the future of cybersecurity is bound to continue evolving. I mean, there is no doubt about it. What do you think the future holds for cybersecurity, especially in terms of possibly new career opportunities that might be evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, for sure. So one trend we're seeing, and it makes sense, right? But there is always going to be a demand on defender roles, right? I mean, any company that now spins up, or anything anyone does, is has the underpinnings of using any technology. And for us to use technology safely, it needs to be secured, right? We need to detect attacks happening. We need to respond to things. And by definition, it means we just need a demand of people working in these defender roles, right? So there's always going to be a huge demand of people working in security operations and incident response roles, and there'll be elements of specialization there. So I think that's one thing that is probably not going to change, but that's probably going to hold true. What people within tech or people working within IT probably already know this, right? But we're seeing companies migrate to cloud, right? And cloud is, I think, at this point probably 10 to 15 years old, if not more. But there are still companies lagging behind, right? So there's going to be a huge demand on cloud security professionals, and more specific to security, the two areas we see come up quite a bit are what you'd say DevSecOps. So for those who don't know, DevSecOps is essentially a set of practices that talks about how do we embed security into our lifecycle more when we create things, right? Because traditionally what would happen is people would create things, they'd create technologies, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's code bases, and then they'll say, okay, let's think about security now, right? But
It's always an afterthought.
yeah, exactly. That's not great for a couple of reasons, right? Because at that point, it becomes expensive to do things. You're ready to launch, but you may not have time. So security does become an afterthought. So DevSecOps talks about how do you What are the set of practices you use to shift left more towards the development cycle so that security is part of every stage, right? DevSecOps is growing and it's becoming so popular. So, and that's pretty important for people, I think, within IT or within engineering, because that's the most directly applicable roles for you guys, right? Within IT, you're probably working with infrastructure people, you're probably maintaining some servers. Chances are, right? I mean, cloud is so popular, you probably have a cloud service on there. So the questions you could be asking yourself are, I'm already working with this piece of technology. What does security look like here? I might be working with different teams that are using this. Have they thought about security components there? So DevSecOps is I think going to be the another huge trend we see coming out.
That is absolutely true, and it's already there. I feel like it's not just cybersecurity. You see DevOps in really all aspects of IT, but definitely cybersecurity is something it's new and it's been needed. I feel like for a long time. It's just it's been so neglected. And like I said earlier, it's always like cybersecurity is always an afterthought of everything, and with things rapidly evolving so quickly, I just did a video talking about the power of AI and how like developers are now coding like 133% faster with the use of AI. But there is baked in security risk with using AI. So, the threat landscape is ever evolving. And, I'm going to address the elephant in the room since we're just talking about AI. Do you think AI is after our jobs? I mean, I hear that left and right from everyone that AI is going to take over the cybersecurity jobs. Do you think that's the case, or what are your thoughts on AI?
Yeah, and I think like what we're going to see AI doing is I think AI will fundamentally give teams more leverage, right? Because some of the use cases we're seeing for AI are, especially on the blue teaming side, right? Where if you work in a security operations role, how can AI eventually help you with that initial triage level, right? So in a security operations role, you're essentially getting alerts, right? Telling you what to check, but you're getting them at a high volume, at a high rate. So how are you, as like right now, it's very human centric, right? So how are you manually going through those alerts and saying, actually, we don't care about this one, but this one is super important. And it looks like there's something fishy happening in our network. So, and in that specific case, right, I think we want to see AI make that process more efficient. And broadly, what AI is going to do is best case scenario, right? AI is going to go into these different aspects of security. It's going to take all these boring, repetitive, and time consuming tasks that people don't like doing, and it's going to automate it to a degree so that humans can spend their time on more complicated things. Because, as much as things like GPT or AI models are smart, right? I think we're not at that stage where they will fully be able to replace like human centric components of security. So you may have, a complicated incident response case across, 10,000 machines with threat actors doing very specific things, right? And AI is not going to be able to, at least I think yet, do a large part of that for you. So it's going to make it efficient for you. It's going to gather the data for you. But I think it's just going to help people do more exciting things as part of their role and give them more time leverage so that they can spend their time on more important things.
I 100% agree with that, and my general response to people who ask me that question is, those people who utilize AI as the tool that it is are going to succeed and go far in the career field.
Exactly.
Those who are worried about it taking them their jobs, they're already behind. They're already behind the ball on it. They're not utilizing it for the tool it can be. So, people who use AI as a tool to help leverage their skills and help continue their education are really going to be successful.
Yeah, that's such a great way to put it, right? I mean, there's such a trend out there. I mean, the thing GPT has done is made AI more accessible, right? So all you need is a free account, short of putting like sensitive data on GPT, you can start using it in your day to day more, right? So I really like your advice about essentially riding out the trend and making sure you're using it because it's there, right? So why shouldn't you?
Absolutely. Now, we touched on this earlier, but I think it's really important to talk about. And the power of community and networking with people can't be overstated, I feel. And especially in fields like cybersecurity, cybersecurity, I feel, is like such a tight knit community, and it's full of people really willing to help you excel and succeed in the career. And I want to ask you, how important is it for newcomers to get involved in the cybersecurity community? And is there any specific networks or forums or events that you recommend people, go to connect and gain insight?
Yeah, no, and that's such a great point, right? I think the true value for like these networks comes in is essentially talking to the people, right? Because when you are early in your career and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, we can watch videos and you can read blogs, but nothing is ever going to take away from that insight of that personal conversation on someone who's done that before and been in your shoes. So I agree. I think you get a ton of value out of it. So and I personally think, I mean, we've seen, at least at TryHackMe, the cybersecurity community is so welcoming. We have a great Discord server. So I see people get a ton of value out of it. And there are a lot of ways to engage with what a broader community looks like, right? So there are elements of in-person conferences that I would highly recommend. And so B-sides are one of probably the most common ones, where B-sides are very local chapter run events based on your local community. So they'll have a B-sides in London, they'll have a B-sides in San Francisco, they probably have a B-sides where you're based out of, Dakota. So those are really great because I think they make them very accessible. And you can just go up there, right? And they range from everything from super high level technical talks to even networking events to spaces where you can just hang out. So I love the full B-sides model, but there
That's
are
cool.
also local run community events, right? So if you're into web application security, OWASP has chapters across the world, and they'll meet up like every couple of months and they'll say, let's just call a bunch of speakers and let's get them to talk about a security topic. And they'll have like a dinner or a hangout. DEF CON also has groups local to those specific areas. So those are like, I think, the starting points I'd recommend for in person. But even for I think it's important to try engage online or within your sphere of influence, right? So for me,
Yeah.
I think Reddit, Discord are super important. That's where I like going to see what the security community is up to, even to get general advice on things. So there are a lot of good security forums on Reddit. There are a lot of great Discord communities. So there's a shameless plug for TryHackMe there. And I think networking can also seem scary, right? Because if you're not used to it, you have to go into this new environment, you have to approach new people, you may not know how they respond, right? But you could also do networking within your own
Yeah.
environment, right? So if you are working in IT, chances are there is a security presence in your company if that is not you. And all it needs is reaching out to that person saying, hey, what is it that you do on your day to day, right? Do you have any like tasks that I can help with? Can I shadow you? And I think starting there is super easy. You know the person, you know the environment, you can get direct hands-on experience. But for
So
people who are
true.
potentially students or people who are at schools, those tend to have local hacking chapters, right? You might have a hacking club. So those are and across, I guess, the in person and across the online, there's so many ways of engaging. So those are probably a couple of places I would start at.
I really like what you said about, networking within your like current organization you're working in. And like, that's how I really developed my skills. I was talking about how I got my start in the field, and my very first job, I was an IT support specialist, which job titles in tech sometimes suck. Let's just get that out of the way. They're never truly what you do. So when I started at this organization, I was a help desk technician. I was resetting Active Directory passwords. I was creating email accounts. I was doing the basics. And I knew, like, I had this goal. I was going to become a network engineer. I wanted to be a network admin. So like, I made it my mission. Every free waking moment, I was like, always like, not, I hate saying pestering my boss, but I was always talking about my ambitions of doing networking. And, he would slowly start giving me like little side projects to work on and bringing me along with him as he was doing networking stuff. And over the 2 years I was with that organization, by the time I left, still the same job, but I had evolved my career, and I was this went from the help desk to designing the complete IT infrastructure for all these brand new hotels we were building. We were a hotel chain. And like when I say designing, I sat down with the engineers, the architects, and we were, whenever they're having building meetings, I'd be in those meetings and like, oh, actually, I need some Cat 6A ran here. We're going to place an access point here. Like I was designing that. And then when the actual building was built, I would actually go on site and like mount the gear. It was so cool. And when I went, for my next job in the career field, I talked about that journey, and it just blew the guy I was interviewing with away. He's like, wow, you really have a passion for this. And again, that progression at my next job, I got hired as a NOC technician, a network operations center technician. And after a little over 90 days, I was promoted to director of network operation, my current role, because I just made it my mission to like learn everything I could. I'd be a fly on the wall any chance I could be, and took like full responsibility for everything I was doing. And it didn't go unnoticed. So that's my story progressing in the networking field. But that exact same story could be your story in cybersecurity. And I've heard plenty of people talk about that story where just talk to your boss, talk to your other employers, mention your interests, mention what you're doing on the side, talk about how you're using TryHackMe in your free time. And they're going to be shocked. They're like, wow. So he works all day long. He or she works all day long and then goes home and does more studying and tries to learn cybersecurity and does it for fun. Maybe we want to try to keep this person around and kind of teach him the ropes. So that is, I think, solid advice you have there.
Yeah, and I love that story, right? Because it just goes to show the power of of like just being determined, right? Because I'd imagine from the outside it makes sense, right? But it is a scary thing to do, right? You're going in, it's feeling like you're pestering your boss, or there's this other security guy who has like all these crazy things to deal with, and you feel bad for bugging him. But my general feeling is people in the security industry tend to be very helpful, right? All you have to do is start with that. And I love your journey, Dakota, of like determination, because you made it happen, right? You pushed for it. People saw the value in it. You've absorbed that knowledge. You're continuing to do it. So I love that you brought a very concrete example to show people how you can actually do it in practice.
I always joke with people, some people have that kitten poster on the wall that's like the cat hanging off a branch saying, hang in there. Not me. I had a certification path hanging on my wall, and that's what was my motivation goal. Right. But, as we land the plane here, if you could go back and give like only one piece of advice for anyone looking to make this switch, switching from the IT field into cybersecurity, what would that one piece of advice be?
It would be talk about your work. Right. I think it is very hard to get through hiring filters these days because, you may not have those concrete skills on paper. You may not have that experience, but people want to see that work. So it could be something as simple as just start a portfolio, right? Just have a blog post and just talk about the things you're doing. You could recreate a challenge box you've done. You could talk about the walkthrough you're doing, but show your work. I think it serves two purposes, right? And I love your example, Dakota, because you need to advocate for yourself, right? You need to show that, yes, I'm doing this. I have these skills. So one is it helps advocate for yourself. But two is it's basically one place where someone can go and say, hey, it could be Ashu and Dakota are trying to break into cyber. Here's a one single pane of glass that I can actually look at how far they've got into their journey. And from an employer's perspective, that makes my life easy, right? Because I can go in and say, oh, this person's CV doesn't have XYZ, but their portfolio is insane, right? They might be doing, hard challenges on TryHackMe, or they might have done lots of learning paths, and they might have built a home lab. And I didn't know they could do this from their CV. So for me, it's about like demonstrating the work you're doing quietly on the sidelines.
And, you don't have to be super elaborate with it. It could just be simple as posting to your LinkedIn profile on a regular basis. But the key is to be regular about it. Don't just like do it for a week or two and then just drop off the face of the earth. If you're going to do this, be serious and like be determined to follow through with it, and if you want to go beyond like just a couple LinkedIn posts, create a blog. You want to go even further, create a YouTube channel. I encourage everyone who wants to be like in this field, go create a YouTube channel, because the best way to learn anything is to teach it. Like,
I agree.
I think that is so empowering. And this is, again, kind of goes back to why I started doing this is, I want to help people and be that voice for them and give them advice. So absolutely.
Yeah, no, those are all great tactical advice. I love it.
So again, thank you so much for taking the time to share so much great wisdom and knowledge. If people want to go check out TryHackMe and, or connect with you, where do you recommend them going?
Yep. So TryHackMe, trackme.com, one word. We were on Reddit. We're on LinkedIn and Twitter. We post a lot about what we're doing there. I'm probably more reachable on LinkedIn, or if people always have questions or specific advice, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. But I'm also active on TryHackMe's Reddit community, so always looking to respond and help people there.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for all this great advice and everything you do for this amazing community.
No, likewise. And it was really great hearing your personal story too, Dakota, and so many nuggets of wisdom from your end. So thank you for having me. And I learned quite a bit too today. So it was great.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And I hope all of you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, keep learning.